Welcome, everyone, to the global gathering Shamanism for Inspired Action from Vision to Creation. This event is designed to share how shamanism can inspire actions and enrich our lives, our communities, and Mother Earth. With deep love, compassion, gratitude, and joy, shamans are the torchbearers of their inner light, taking action motivated by a deep sense of purpose. Shamanism is a way to tap into creative inspiration that comes from within, the spirit we are, that will lead us to take authentic steps towards what our hearts and souls desire most. We will discuss what's possible when the invisible realms are acknowledged and honored, when nature is loved and celebrated as part of ourselves. We'll explore how surrendering to our helping spirits, our ancestors, can help support our action. Shamanism provides a space to deepen our inner knowledge so that new ideas, new thoughts, and pathways can emerge. So, in a time when it can be tempting to define ourselves solely through external concepts, your participation at this global gathering will inspire you to reconnect with your inner wisdom and to act in alignment with your spiritual source. So, it is with great gratitude and great joy that I welcome everyone to be part of this global gathering. I'm Céline Roche, I'm your host for this event, and I'm very happy to present you Jamie Mayer. Jamie, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Um, Thank you again. And I'm going to introduce you to the people who may not know about you yet. So Jamie has an eclectic background, and it includes earning a master's degrees in theology and the arts from United Seminary of the Twin Cities and studies with a variety of and he studied with a variety of shamanic teachers for more than 30 years. He's the author of 2 books, Healing with Shamanism and Drumming the Soul Awake, and 20 of his plays have been produced in various cities in the US. He co-founded the first theater in the world for the Hmong community, a refugee population from Laos and Vietnam, and managed it for 10 years, mentoring scores of young Hmong actors and writers. And since 2015, he's been learning from the Shipibo master in the Amazon jungle. Some of his teachers include Jose and Lena Stevens, Tom Cohen, Elo Gop, Martin Pratchell, and Sandra Hingeman. So again, it's an honor to have you, Jamie. And today you're going to talk about fear, trust, and optimism in shamanic practice. That's a lot.
Yeah, so small topics. Fear, trust, and optimism. They're all very, very easy, aren't they? Well, I guess let's start with, when you first contacted me and asked me what might be fun to talk about, the word fear always comes up for me because we're in a world of a lot of fear. I don't know if our world today has more fear in it than any other time period or whatever. I kind of doubt that. But I think that maybe the world or different nations or whatever go through periods where fear is more rampant and more kind of like making decisions for us. And we're definitely in that now, at least in my world of the United States. And so there's a lot of fear around us. Fear is an energy field, shamanically speaking. It's an energy field like anything else, like love or wonder or awe. These are all energy fields that we can choose. Sometimes we think we can't, but we do have the ability to choose what energy fields we invite into our own personal field. To help us make decisions about who we are and who we want to be, how we want to walk through the world, etc. So fear is a big topic, and I've been teaching a lot for many years, and I think truthfully say that everybody who has ever studied with me and myself, as I've studied with other people, fear is a tremendous companion on the shamanic path. We're always afraid of, like, what's this next thing I'm learning, or afraid of this experience that I had, or afraid of the experience that I might have, or afraid that the experience I had, I've just made it up and I'm crazy and I don't know what I'm doing, etc., etc. So fear is a constant companion on the shamanic path. And we also have kind of, so it's so common for people to have a sense of like, oh, my fear is my personal weakness. Like other people studying shamanism, they go along, they say all these things and do these things, and they don't seem to have any fear. And so it's evidence of my personal weakness or my inabilities. Like I'm not, like really shamanic like other people because they don't have the fears that I do. And all of that is just part of the lies that fear tells us, because everybody has these fears. So, like, no matter where you are studying your shamanic path or any spiritual path, I think for that matter, fear is a companion. And so then we have to ask, like, why? Why is that? And there's a number of answers, but like my favorite answer, I think, shamanically speaking, is that fear is one of our spirit guides. We think of it as the obstacle that is always in my way, that I somehow have to defeat or evaporate or whatever. And part of that's kind of partially true. But the other part of fear is it's also a protector for us. It helps us to be careful about power that we're stepping into, because we don't want to step into power before we're ready to hold it. And so our fear in that way is like a bodyguard, like an energetic bodyguard in certain ways. And we can kind of, transform our relationship with our fear from being like a tormentor that tells us how weak we are, to being a guardian that is saying to us, are you sure you want to do this? And then we can say, yeah, I'm sure I want to do this. And so we can, I think that's probably for me, I've had a lot of fearful experiences in my shamanic training, and I'm I've often felt that I've been too afraid and too cautious, and I've moved too slowly, therefore. But looking back, I'm really grateful that my fears helped me be cautious. So that's kind of what I have to say about fear for right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really great insight. And could you put it into the context of, being inspired, having a vision, being inspired, receiving this powerful message, and how fear can help with that message, or as you said, prevent us from maybe going too fast.
Yeah, so the thing about fear, I think, is that it seems to come at us as one like vague blanket of like, stop what you're doing, you're wrong, cower on the floor, and stop. So it seems to be like one just overwhelming, like, stop what you're doing kind of thing. And so in the way of saying, well, if fear is actually a form of a helping spirit, then there's another layer there, rather than this overwhelming sense of like, stop, you're silly, you're crazy, whatever. We can ask the fear to give us some patience, and ask it. We can come into dialogue with the fear and ask it to help us discern what it is we're actually afraid of. Because usually what comes to us is these kind of big things like, oh, you're silly, you're crazy. For people who are like myself, who are not connected organically into an indigenous culture, a big fear comes up like, oh, you're just a white guy, it's all cultural appropriation, it's all this. So this giant energy of just stop what you're doing. And if we ask, well, really, like, do you really want me to stop what I'm doing? Do you want me to just go to work at the money factory, and try to buy all the shit that people, that the money factory tells me I should buy, and is that what you're saying, that I should just join in with the world that in many people's views is like spinning downward and nowhere? You're saying that's what I should do. And so when we ask the fear like that, of course that's not the answer. Of course that's not what we want, you know. Um, and so then we can ask, well, what is it I'm really afraid of? And it usually comes down to being something uh, fairly benign, like, oh, I'm afraid I'm crazy, you know, and that's a really common thing for people. I'm afraid I'm crazy. I'm afraid I'm just making stuff up. And you penetrate that and you realize, well, a couple of things. First of all, am I really crazy? Of course not. You know, only sane people ask themselves if they're crazy. You know what I mean? Like people who are crazy don't ask that question. They're totally confident in the crazy stuff that they're doing. So by asking the question, am I crazy? You're answering it like I'm not. Um, by asking the question, am I being silly? You're able to delve into well, what is it that is really driving me? There's a love of life that's driving me. There's a grief about the way things are currently, and that in that grief I don't want to live in that grief. I want to live in that love. There's a yearning inside me that is as old as humanity itself, and that yearning is not for many of the things that I'm told by our mainstream culture that I should yearn for. So you start to penetrate into your actual authentic depths by talking to the fear and asking it, what am I actually afraid of? You know, people are like, I'm afraid of going off on some wackadoodle track. I can't tell you how many students I've had who have said this. I'm afraid I'm gonna go off on some crazy path, and I'm gonna end up living under a bridge. They say that phrase. I'm gonna end up living under a bridge, and so you have to ask yourself, well, you know, what does that mean? You know, anyway, by talking to the fear as though it is actually a protector and a wisdom teacher, then we can penetrate into our actual authentic yearnings and our authentic love. And it can help us really kind of take on some strength there. And to some degree, you know, put away some of the sillier kind of blanket fears. And, you know, your phrase, inspired action, you know, I've been kind of musing on this for a while because we tend to think, or at least I do, tend to think when we talk about inspired action, my mind generally goes right to like political action, marching in the streets, you know, writing opinion pieces for the paper, getting into arguments on Facebook with people, etc. And that's all okay, and that's probably inspired action. But when it comes down to it, uh, all of our actions begin first in our relationship with spirit and our what the theologians call our model of the divine, our model of God. And so to actually have inspired action, we have to form a, a an authentic and solid relationship with spirit in whatever way that we conceive spirit. So inspired action, this is an answer to this phrase, what is inspired action, that I have trouble with, but it's the same. Whenever I think about it, it comes down to the same thing. We cannot enter into inspired action without doing our inner work, without going inside and doing this inner work and asking ourselves, how does spirit work in the world? How do I believe spirit works in the world? What is spirit? How does it work with me? What is my organic connection with spirit? How does that show up? This is all this inner work that seems to be not about the world outside because it's all inner and you know, invisible. But without doing that inner work, we plunge out into the world, you know, with our sword out of the scabbard, slicing away, and we get the world that we have right now. You know, we have all sorts of people, you know, doing all sorts of actions in the world that they may feel like they're inspired, but if they're disconnected from the spirit of life, all it does is, like as the Buddhists say, it just turns the wheel of samsara, turns the wheel of suffering, It just replaces one king with the next king, or one general with the next general in the army. And so inspired action for me has to come from doing inner work first. And that inner work is a long process. So long and painful and confusing process. Yeah, that's kind of my answer to it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's excellent insight. Thank you so much. And also the practice calls for that. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Mm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, at least in my world, I don't know well, I was going to say, I don't know if the United States is any wackier than other countries, but I actually believe it is. um, a lot of people, or one of my pet peeves, and I guess it's because of shamanic training for me is different in some ways than other sorts of spiritual paths. Many people have a hope, which I think is kind of a fantasy, that somehow I just open to spirit, and it floods in and I'm transformed, and now I know, like I'm in the whatever, I'm operating in the fifth dimension or whatever it is. I'm ascended or whatever, and I'm just operating there, and that it's like either like a bolt from spirit that like transforms you, or it's just your personal ability or whatever. I am from a more kind of mundane point of view, which is it takes practice. That's what all the spiritual practices in all the traditions are about. And you see practices in every tradition, even the ones that you think are not good or whatever. They're filled with practice, daily practice that take you do two things. They shift your energy, and they take you into a repetitive relationship with spirit that becomes boring, and you have to move through that, and then you learn more from it, and it becomes boring again, and you have to move through it. And so it's our practices, our spiritual practices, that we have to combine along with our yearning and our reading and our conversations and opening wisdom, or doing ayahuasca journeys and etc. All of that is good, but without a sustained spiritual practice to anchor you and to move you forward through the world, a lot of, well, I'll be bold and say all that other work just kind of dissipates. That's kind of a bold thing to say, but I'll say it. I guess I already have said it.
Thank you for being bold. And how do you think that this relationship with spirit can support, the discipline of the practice, which is key, as you
Oh
alluded
yeah, yeah. Here's the thing. A lot of people, myself included, probably, many people, when they think about a disciplined spiritual practice, first of all, they don't know what to do, and so you have to kind of find it. But a lot of times people think, oh, uh, discipline means this forced, I have to do this. I don't like it. I don't want to. My body and mind and heart are full of resistance, and I have to like pound my way every day through this discipline. So for me, that is when I have that feeling, um, I become aware that it's because I'm not working with joy. I'm not working with a sense of joy for the spirit of life. And so I have to kind of retrace, like when I start my morning practice, for example, if I'm like, oh God, oh, I can't, I don't want to, I have to kind of retrace and step back and remember how incredible it is to be a human being. The Buddhists call this remembering the preciousness of your human life, filled with liberty and opportunity. Like that's a phrase that comes out of Tibetan Buddhism that I just love. Remembering, I have this opportunity as a human being to be like a really incredible being on this planet, and as far as I know, no other creature on the planet does its morning prayer practice. I don't know, maybe, the deer eating the grass and looking at the rising sun, maybe that's its spiritual practice. But I have an opportunity to say I am or am not going to consciously work with my spiritual essence. I have a choice to expand my perception and say, wow, I'm part of something, that's inconceivable to me, but I know I'm part of it. I have this choice, this liberty to choose to enter into a big consciousness or not. And so I have to go back to that. And then, like, with that choice, then my practice opens up again and it has more joy. So, yeah, we have a lot of kind of like, coming out of kind of the like the twisted masculine of like hammer away, hammer away, hammer away. It's like, well, yeah, you can do that and you can achieve a lot, but hammering away is not going to achieve spiritual connection. There maybe there's some oomph there, but the spiritual connection has to come essentially out of the love of being alive. And for a lot of people, that's not easy because there's a lot of fear and a lot of doom and a lot of grief. And so sometimes it's difficult to resuscitate that idea of the love of being alive.
Yeah, thank you. And so about what you said, how the practice can help reduce the fear. So you mentioned, remembering that, it's joyful, celebrating life, that I'm alive. So that's one way to reduce fear. But could you share other example of how the practice reduce fear overall?
I think what the power of fear does to us is it tells us that we are not in control of anything. You know, like that's basically fear's game. You're not in control of anything. That's the immediate like thin message of fear. You're not in control of anything. Like your money life is going to crash, you're going to die, you'll probably get sick, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is going to crash and you're not in control of anything. You can't control anything. Um, but the as we work with fear as an ally, and we can ask ourselves, is that really true? And it's like, it's not really true. I have the choice. Like I have the choice of whether to be cowering in fear at this moment or not. It oftentimes feels like we don't, but we really do. And then as we work with fear as that ally, we can get behind that first message and we can kind of enter into the next deeper message, which is it is true. For example, like we're all going to die, like every one of us. I'm going to die, and the timing of my death is uncertain. So this is actually a great gift to us because the way that what we call the ordinary world works, at least in capitalist Western world, there's this constant denial that we're going to die. And we think, oh, somehow if I keep making more money and buying more things, it somehow keeps death away. Or, there's a variety of, but mostly it's a distraction. So by shattering that distraction, that like, oh, my new car or my new TV or whatever somehow keeps death at bay, by shattering that and remembering I am going to die. I am not in control ultimately, but that actually opens my freedom of choice moment by moment, and it makes the moment infinite. And so that this is the great gift of the fear that comes to us and says you're not in control of anything. And then you realize, yeah, and that's actually a great thing. If I want it to be, if I want it to be a gift of spirit. There's this phrase that I came across a while ago, attributed, it was on the internet, so it's attributed to the Norwegians, like whatever that means. But it says, death is the mother of beauty. And I love that phrase. And I've kind of extended it to say, the awareness of death is the mother of beauty and it's the mother of meaning. If we push away the awareness of death, then our meaning, the meaning that we try to draw from life becomes very small and very thin, I think. When we bring the awareness of death in, suddenly, the small things get shattered, and the meaning of life for us takes on all sorts of other possibilities. So this is how I think, like, working with fear, penetrating it, asking it to be our teacher, and asking it to show us the layer right behind the first layer. The first layer is always full of lies. Show us the second layer. Um, uh, and so we ask, what are the lies in this first layer? And the lies are pretty easy to spot if you think about it. And then you're asking that ally of fear to take you to the second layer where it's full of wisdom teaching, at least for me.
Yeah, yeah, I hear. And it's also wonderful to have the choice, as you said,
Yeah.
it's the teacher for choices and expansion. So in again the realm of fear, how can we trust pretty much in anything these days?
I think that's uh, a lot. Many people's that's their main trouble today. We feel like we can't trust any information. Um, uh, we're not sure we can trust each other because you might be talking to somebody and we're on edge that, like, oh, these three things they've said, they sound okay because they fit into my bubble of reality, but I'm afraid that the next question I ask you, you'll reveal that you're actually from the enemy's side or whatever. You'll say something, they'll realize, oh, you're not one of me. So we have a tremendous amount of mistrust, and I think in a certain way, everybody, like in my world, like the shamanic, industry, the shamanic industrial complex, if you want to call the teachers who are out there on the internet and, trying to make a living, etc. We're all saying the same thing, right? We're in this tremendous shift of consciousness. So we like to say that, but, like, what does it really mean? Uh, the shift of consciousness is an initiation. And from the shamanic or the indigenous point of view, initiation has, in my view, has three parts to it. The first part is the break. All initiation is about taking on a new shape. The first part is dissolving or exiting your current shape. That's the place we're in right now. And we probably have been in this place, I think, through the 20th century, probably, maybe longer, I don't know. Um, but the first part of the initiation is dissolving the current shape of things. That's where we are right now. So everything is falling. Institutions, ideas, the ideas that we've rested on for a long time, it's all chipping away. And we can interpret that as, I can't trust anything, which in some respect is kind of true. Like, I can no longer trust the old story that I grew up with. I can no longer trust, the system that I grew up being told to trust. So we can lament that, and say everything's wrong, and we can try to somehow piece it back together, which is one part of the big recipe. Now many people are trying to piece it back together. It's not going to get pieced back together. It's not going to. So then we can look at it through a shamanic lens, which is resistance is really the creator of the malaise, the creator of the trouble. It's our resistance to the shift. You can't blame people for being resistant. Everybody's resistant. Even people who are in a horrible situation are resistant to changing the situation. So that's a human thing. But that's the nature of it. Everything is, not everything, but the things that are no longer necessary for our advancement are what are falling. So then we can ask ourselves, well, this is the natural part of the initiation into the next shape. A lot of the talk about the changing of consciousness kind of skips over this pain, and it kind of goes right to, oh, we're going to teach you these techniques to, whatever, enter the 12th dimension and whatever. But they kind of skip over the natural part of initiation, which is it's very painful to let go of even for those of us who say, "Oh, I was never connected to capitalism or to the Christian, theology. Like I'm not part of that." It's really not true. Like if you're born into this culture, all those things are embedded in you. Anyway, there's a natural pain there. If you look at that as that's the natural part of the process, in a certain way that can help relieve some of the fear around it. It doesn't make it all easy all of a sudden, but it can help relieve some of the fear to say this is actually spirit at work.
Mm.
It's not a mistake. It's not a whatever. It's not a big evil. It's the natural part of changing shape. Like when the snake sheds its skin, we hardly ever talk about how painful that must be. Like we just, oh look, the snake has shed its skin. How wonderful. But we don't think about it must be really, really hard. It has to like whatever, dry and rip and shred, and then it has to wriggle its way out. It's really painful. Same thing with the butterfly, the caterpillar goes in, its whole body dissolves and becomes a gelatin. Like the caterpillar goes in, it weaves the thing around, the cocoon around itself, and then its entire body becomes gelatin. Now, they may not have a consciousness like us. Maybe they don't go through the fear. I don't know. But talk about, letting go of everything old. And then it sits in that state for a while. And who knows what happens. And at a certain point, the butterfly starts to form and it comes out. But wow, like we don't talk about like how much terror there might be in that. Anyway, here we are in the disassembly. The next part of the initiation is crossing the threshold naked. Our clothing, our identity, everything has been, taken and dissolved. What's left? Our pure essence, the pure eternal essence that's traveling through eternity. That's what we can trust. You know, every religious tradition, I think, every spiritual tradition reminds us that all these external parts of us, my identity, my status, my possessions, they're okay. It's okay to have them, but they're not who I am. And so where we have to place our trust is in my eternal essence. That's the one that is shedding what's happening now. That's the one that steps through the gateway or the doorway. And on the other side, the new clothing, the new shape is added on. This is the same process. If you believe in reincarnation, it's the same process we go through every time we reincarnate. It's really the same process we go through every time we fall asleep, and then weird stuff happens at night, and then we wake up and we come through the gate again, in a more minor way. So this is not easy, but this is the center of being a human being, that we have to remember who we are at our very essence. We're this, however you want to articulate it, we're a traveling spark of the divine, putting on costume after costume after costume, not only individually, but in groups, as tribes, as cities, as nations, as a species. And right now, we're in a giant initiation of the entire species. I don't know if the rest of the world, if all the badgers and the caterpillars and the bats and the vultures are like sitting around in the limbs of their trees saying, oh, we're in a giant initiation. I'm not sure they're thinking that. But and they may not be in the same initiation that we are, but there's no doubt about it that our species is in an initiatory period. And we can enter that consciously, which will help, or we can enter it unconsciously, which is then filled with disaster. So that's why when we go back to the inspired action being internal, that's where we can drive a conscious initiation. This doesn't make it somehow happier or like filled with joy or whatever. It's really hard. but it can help us have kind of a more of a plumb line into the essence, and a plumb line into the trust of spirit. It can help. It helps me anyway. Rather than me being swept away by the anger and the blame and the doom and stuff like that, that's all there, but I can still draw a plumb line into, I think spirit is doing its job here, initiating our species. Um, so it just helps.
Yeah.
I don't know if it helps other people, but it helps me.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you said about, how the practice can help us to act from a context of it's happening for me and not to me. So it's all the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can join in with it,
yeah.
or I can resist it. If I join in with it, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to suddenly be happy and glowing with spirit. It just means I'm making a choice to join the flow. Like in my work, I do teaching work. I teach on the internet. I teach classes live here in Minneapolis where I live. I do healing work with clients. I often ask myself, like, is anything I'm doing of help at all? However, how many tens of thousands or whatever of shamanic teachers are out there on the internet, smarter than me, more holy than me, etc. How many healers are out there, way better than me? Am I doing anything that has any kind of an effect? And so I can go into that. But what helps me is to come back again to the center and ask myself, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to live my life in resistance to everything, making everyone an enemy, imagining ways to crush them, etc.? Or do I want to live with at least a small sense that in some way that I can't even describe, I am contributing to the flowering or the open flow or to this wave of change in the little things that I do, like every client that I have or every class I teach. I'm just contributing to the overall flow. When I look at it like that, everything goes back into like, okay, that's okay. Because when we think about the whole, and we're up against the whole, none of us can change the whole,
Yeah.
you know.
And maybe you can tell us more about this optimism that it provides.
Well, for me, I think that's where, if optimism is going to be there, it it it's connected to that sense that I'm just doing what I can. I'm just a limited human being, like I'm in this body, I have this size of mind, etc. I have these skills that I've acquired. I can only do what I can do. But if I can feel like I'm connecting that into a larger positive flow of things, even if I can't see the flow, and I absolutely cannot see how it will play out. Like nobody knows what's going to happen. Everybody who thinks they can predict the future, they're just whatever, making a buck or whatever. Nobody knows how things are going to turn out. We can only kind of guess that, like if I live in this way, and if more people do, I think that's going to play out better than if I live in this way, and or in this way. So for me, the optimism really comes down to summoning compassion for the state of things generally. Rather than looking at the world as, oh, it's all messed up and all these horrible people are in control, and there's so much stupidity and ignorance and blah blah, making the world an enemy. It helps me to remember that everybody is working through the challenge of being a human being. Everybody has a different set of skills, maybe a different level of wisdom or whatever, I don't know, but everybody's working on it. And everybody is also working with their own fears. So everybody has their own fears and their own connection with divinity, and that mix is different for everybody. And so entering into a state of compassion that like we're really all in this soup together, and I'm hoping the best for everybody. Those people who I think of as, ignorant or as my enemies or whatever, making prayers for them to have less fear and more spirit is really helpful to me. That gives me some optimism. Um, uh, Compassion for myself, like all the times that I fall into the hole of pessimism or whatever, and just like, you're going to do that because you're a human. Like, you're going to fall in the hole, but you don't have to stay in the hole. You can ask for help to get out of that hole. So for me, compassion is a real key to optimism. And the other key is understanding, as I said a little while ago, understanding that we're all part of a flow that spirit is in control of. That phrase is difficult for me because I hear that phrase from other kind of religious perspectives when they say, "Oh, God is in control," and I'm like, "Well, I hope not. Like the God that you have in your mind, I hope not." And I think you're wrong about that. But I say the same thing, ultimately spirit's in control. So, but my model of spirit is really different than other people's model. I do believe that spirit is, is in control of things. Whatever you want, however you want to see spirit, it's ultimately in control. And, also for me, it took me a long time to really become comfortable with the idea of reincarnation and many lifetimes, because it was a theological concept that I just, I don't know, I thought, oh, this is another made up thing that we can believe or not. But it actually helps me be very more optimistic, knowing that every lifetime is basically like one day. Like I wake up every morning and things are a little different. We're all going to go through our lifetimes, and we're going to come back in different ways, and things will flow. So it kind of helps to lift some pressure, that like everything has to be accomplished in this lifetime.
Yeah, yeah.
That puts a lot of pressure on people. I also like the idea that like I'm coming back in some other form, and I won't remember this guy that I am now, but things that I do now can contribute to that person that's coming back later. And the best contribution I can make to that future person is to move beyond my current fear zone and to move out and to shed as much fear as I can and to bring in as much love of life as I possibly can. That's the greatest gift that I can give to future whoever I am, because any fear that I don't deal with is going to weigh down future me. Any openness that I acquire is going to lift and help future me. So that's that immediate practice again, that's really helpful for me.
That's a very inspiring action. So thank you for sharing it. Absolutely. And also, as you share about this beautiful, optimistic, experience with the practice, could you share some outcome that you've realized out of being present, to your inner self, to your connection to spirit, and to the love, light? Can you share something you
Yeah,
realized?
the thing that comes to mind, I a little bit resist saying this because it sounds a little magical, but I think that I have, so I've been in like whatever you want to call it, the business or the profession of being a shamanic practitioner for, well, I've been at it for 30 years, but I've been making my living at it for about 12 years. So making a living as shamanic practitioner can be pretty dicey. It can be up and down. You're not sure if you're going to have income, etc. I've been really, really blessed to be able to stay at it. But I struggle month by month often with like, oh, I'm gonna here's like I'll make my prayers like, oh, what kind of class should I teach next month? and I'll try to receive these prayers, and I'll have like the class that made money last year at this time comes up, and I'm like, oh, I should teach that because that made money. And then I'll have these, these other ideas like, oh, you should teach this. And I'll be like, oh God, no, like I'm not capable of teaching that. That's beyond me. That's too much wisdom. I'm just a crappy little guy. I can't teach that. And so I'm confronted every time I do this, every month, with go for the thing that seemed to make money before, because I've got to make some money, or go for the thing that kind of spirit tells you to do that's kind of exciting but daunting, and I'm not sure if it'll make money. And I'm telling you, Celine, every time I have chosen this one, oh, that made money last year, it falls flat. Um, and every time I've chosen this one, that's like, oh God, I'm not capable of that. Like, oh, my teachers could teach that, but I'm too small and weak and horrible to teach that, etc. Every time I've entered into that and said yes, it's gone fine. I can't think of a time where like that message from Spirit has come and I'll do that, and it's like complete disaster. So that's like my evidence, like when we, for me anyway, when I do that, the hard work of saying yes to spirit that's full of some doubt, some fear, etc., and I penetrate through that and I say yes to it, I think I can say it has always worked out for me, and it has frequently worked out better than when I'm go retreat to some perceived sense of safety. And that's where we are as a species right now. We've got to make some really, really courageous choices, and particularly about like I think that part of our big initiation here is that we're in a time of redefining abundance. Like we've defined abundance in a certain way for really hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Abundance, for us basically is hard objects that you can fill your house with. And then you have to create the money and you have to draw the resources to do that. But we all know, like even in our heart of hearts, and you look through the indigenous world, we know that abundance is softer than that. Abundance is a sense of connection to the love of life. It's a connection to each other. It's having trust in spirit. Every indigenous teacher I've worked with has kind of, I want to say hammered into me, but not hammered, but just emphasized that every bit of our abundance comes from Mother Earth, from Pachamama. So every time you're afraid about how things are turning out, rather than like frantically run around and try to fix things, take your prayers to Mother Earth, because she has always delivered to us. She always delivers. So take your prayers and remember that she always gives you what you need. That can be really hard for us, especially in Western culture where we think we need so much. That costs so much money. So then we have to get the best paying job, and we know that the best paying jobs are contributing to the destruction of the ecosystem, etc. And we're trapped in that whole thing. Anyway, I think that one of our biggest tasks is redefining abundance. And as I said earlier, we'll either consciously redefine abundance, and that will come a little easier, not without suffering, but a little easier, or we will unconsciously redefine abundance through the crashing of systems totally, because we're not willing to consciously redefine abundance.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing this. Redefining abundance and giving up what we think is fulfilling.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's really beautiful, and this was really my intention with the conference, to call for those big actions that we need to take on and how it can be supported. And as you said, you gave a beautiful example, very powerful example of how when we think this is not going to be the best choice, it ends to be the best.
Yeah.
And in the abundance that you're talking about, this type of abundance. So thank you so much. Thank you. This was really, really great, very insightful. And you have one more gift. So we'll put your gift on the conference website. Thank you so much for your generosity. And is there anything you would like to say to close this beautiful
Not that I
interview?
know of. I mean, I guess I should, since I'm, like in business, I should say, my website is
Yes.
drummingthesoulawake.com. People feel free to check me out, check out my teachings, etc. Thanks for doing this conference. Thanks for bringing people together and helping us move all this energy forward. And thanks for your energy in doing all this. I
No, thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much. It's my pleasure, my honor. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you everyone for watching this video or listening to it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye bye.